Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this council meeting on the Monday, 23rd of September 2024. I will now ask you to remain standing and silent whilst my chaplain, Phil Pusey, MBE, leads us in prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, elected members, council officials and members of the public. One of my pet hates is radio TV shows which invite two or more people with dramatically opposed views to come and debate the issue at hand. The reason I dislike them so much is that they seem designed to create an argument rather than a better understanding of the topic up for discussion. I'm sure we've all seen the comic strip with two people standing opposite each other, one arguing that there's a 6 in front of them and the other utterly convinced it's a 9. So rather than simply arguing or disagreeing, what are the benefits of explaining and understanding multiple different perspectives on any issue? Firstly, it expands our thinking. We see others' perspective and it provides us with a fuller picture. It develops our empathy and our listening skills, increases our ability to include others equitably, reduces our bias and our judgments and the need to defend a set entrenched position. It can even increase creativity, sometimes by listening and airing views on alternate solutions. Something new appears in the room that none of us brought in. It ensures that differences of opinion are worked out in a healthy tension and not in any destructive or damaging ways. It helps us to find the common good between us rather than focusing on the differences. It goes without saying what the negatives of not doing this are. So before we enter into the business of this evening, let's pray with this in mind. Creative God, I thank you that each person present this evening is unique, priceless, and carries your image. Help us to treat each other with dignity, respect, and infinite worth in all of our discussions and reactions. I pray for wisdom for the councillors, for strength and for courage to do what is right and good for all citizens of East Staffordshire. The interests of others above our own. Act for the common good and know your guidance in every decision made tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please may I ask you to remain standing while we observe a minute's silence for Alderman Mick Bowring, who sadly passed away earlier this week. Thank you, everyone. Just before we sit, may I remind you all that we're being broadcast live this evening via the internet, and the record will be archived for future viewing. So could all councillors ensure that they speak with the microphone on, and when they've finished, turn the microphone off. Thank you. and that way the cameras can focus on the individual who is actually speaking. Thank you very much. You may sit down. Okay, may I ask for apologies for absence from the Chief Executive, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Apologies have been received from Councillors Chowdhury, George, Peters and Huckabee. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Then we move to the minutes of the previous council meeting. May I propose approval of the public minutes of the council meeting held on the 8th of July 2024? Can I have a seconder, please? Fitzpatrick. Can we now vote with a show of hands? Those for? Those against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you very much. Number 4 is announcements from the Mayor, the Leader of the Council or the proper officer. I've not had any to make. I'll just check there's no more announcements. Thank you. Number 5, urgent business. There is no urgent business for consideration at this meeting this evening. Thank you very much. So we move to number 6, which is a motion. I invite the Leader of the Council to put forward the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's always a great pleasure to move a motion for members of staff who have been with us such a long time. So I'll formally move the motion that the Mayor present a certificate to a long-serving officer in recognition of their service to the Council of 35 years and above. If I can just say that it's a particular pleasure on this case. The officer is Linda MacDonald, who's in the room, and words like dedication, professionalism, and great management skills come to mind. I've moved the motion, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Allen, thank you. We need so all in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? I think that's unanimous. Before we make the presentation, I'm inviting the Chief Executive to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor. It gives me really great privilege to introduce Linda to you all this evening. Some of you will come across Linda delivering reports in your groups and at Cabinet, etc. I'm going to just talk a little bit about Linda's time at the Council. So she joined us in 1989 as HR assistant. She became the senior HR officer, I think on the 3rd of April 2000, becoming the principal HR officer in 2001. In 2012, she became the Shared Service Centre Manager for HR, OD and Payments, which in layman's terms is the HR manager, as we probably know her most of all. It's the type of role, though, where I'd love to be able to tell you about funny stories, but most of them are confidential, as you can imagine. Linda would kill me if I did. But in all seriousness, I do mean this as genuine as you can in this situation. She has been held in the highest esteem by the corporate management team, the managers, staff, members, and trade unions for 35 years. I genuinely believe she's been one of our greatest officials and the servants, one of the best servants we've seen at East Staffordshire Borough Council. And part of that talent that she has is that she's always loyal to the council. She isn't loyal to anybody individually. She's not loyal to me or my predecessors. She has just been, has lived the motto of the council, strength through unity, and she's one of our best officers that we've had. So I'm going to finish there, Mayor, in that respect, but I know we have a presentation to make to Linda as well.
Okay, so our next item of business this evening is a petition. In accordance with Part 4J of the Constitution, we have a petition from a member of the public. Just before we start, may I remind councillors there's a maximum of 30 minutes for consideration of this petition. May I invite the petition organiser, Mr. John Anderson, to come down and present his position. He has 5 minutes in order to speak. So we're going to start the clock now.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councillors, officers and members of the public. I started the petition against separate charges for the brown bin service because it's not fair on our residents. The cost of this service has traditionally been paid out of council tax, and this should continue. We are now in the cost of living crisis and many residents are struggling already. Those on the breadline will be forced into giving up the service, but will still need to dispose of garden waste. On the 18th of March 24, a majority of the councillors of ESBC voted to make a charge to residents for the emptying of brown wheelie bins. It seems this charge will begin in October. Many residents, whether on the breadline or not, will not pay the charge. Green waste will end up in the grey general waste bins and will then be incinerated, creating pollution. Green waste will end up in the blue recycling bins, causing lorry loads of recyclable materials to be rejected with the associated financial penalties. Green waste will be fly tipped. ESBC CCE team will then have to remove it from country lanes and public spaces at a cost to the taxpayer. Green waste will be burned, causing bonfire smoke pollution. Green waste will be transported to the tip, causing vehicle emission pollution. Does all of the aforementioned fit with ESBC's environmental policy? I've heard the argument that the new system is fairer. Only those using the service will pay under the new system. So, under this rationale, do only ill people pay for the NHS? Why didn't those that didn't use the brown bin service in the past receive a rebate from their council tax? Maybe this council needs to refund the residents that haven't been using their brown bins for, say, 5 years. Residents that do not wish to subscribe to your scheme will wish to know when you will be collecting your bins from their properties. Why should they store your property? Can they charge ESBC for the storage? Maybe the residents need to run a consultation on how much they charge ESBC for storing their bins. It could be a leading consultation that has no options other than predetermined prices, just like the current ESBC consultation for charging for brown bin collections. The ESBC consultation is very much a leading outcome-orientated consultation that has no place for residents to choose to maintain the status quo by continuing to pay through council tax. Nor does it have a place for residents to choose their own amount, should they wish to be treated as intelligent enough to have free thought. The brown bin consultation contradicts the Labour Party manifesto on which the party members were elected. Some residents have paid for a second brown bin. The deal with ESBC was that they had the bin emptied forever. ESBC are now reneging on that deal. Part of the reasoning behind ESBC needing more cash is the reduction of central government funding to local authorities under the last government. Your Labour government is now in power, so surely they will restore sensible funding to your local authorities, won't they? If some financial savings need to be made, I have some suggestions. Remove the mayor's role. Do not have nibbles in the mayor's parlour after the full council meetings. By nibbles, I mean a buffet with drinks. All of you councillors, could give up your allowance and be true volunteers for the good of his staffs. I'm no economist, but I believe the savings I've suggested would add up to over £280,000. There will be many other savings that can be made without charging residents for essential services.
Excuse me, you have 30 seconds left.
I must also ask, how are the council's financial reserves? It is a very poor decision to hit the residents in these tough times when other alternatives can be found. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. You may sit down. Okay, so I'll now open it up for debate. Each councillor can speak for a maximum of 5 minutes, so can I please have an indication of who wants to speak? Councillor Sankey.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support this petition along with a lot of the residents in my ward. This particular policy is not a fair policy. It disadvantages a lot of people. Financially, it doesn't stack up. There is no reason for the financial justification of this. I'll put up on the motion on notice if I may. But if I can concentrate more on the consultation element, I have issues with the consultation element, serious issues with the consultation element of this. The Labour administration were very quick to criticise previous consultations, saying that they were pretty poor. They've been very focused in saying that we must get better, and they've come up with standards. Yet they produce this consultation that says, here is a service that you're not paying for. You've got 3 choices. Pay £40, you pay the amount there, which we'd already budgeted with what we wanted. £40 plus extra money, or £40 plus a lot more money. This is all around consultation. This is a bit like going to the residents saying, do you want me to slap your face once, twice or 3 times? There are options around consultation. You didn't have to just say that is not consultation. You could have said, looked at other aspects. The finance part of it do a consultation around the budget every year and identifies areas that the residents view as important and less important. You could look at areas there you can make savings or not make savings or charges there. But this is so unreasonable on a consultation point of view. One other point, if I may, Madam Mayor, I believe I'm allowed to ask a question to the petitioner, I understand. Is that correct?
You may.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the aspects that's been used is lots and lots of councils do this, so what are you complaining about? Right? And they've quoted 70%. Well, actually, that says a third of the councils don't do this. Right? So I would like to ask John if you could comment on what he thinks about that aspect of the issue, because it is a particular point that everybody else does it, so why aren't we doing it? And actually, a large number don't do it. So I wouldn't mind if you could comment on that, Madam Mayor, and I will finish at that point. So thank you very much.
Okay, can we have any more questions to John? Councillor Fitzpatrick first and then Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On February the 19th, 2024, earlier this year, the Council approved its budget. This included for Cabinet to consider the introduction of a subscription-based garden waste service. The petition organiser states in his petition that on the 18th of March 2024, a majority of councillors voted to make a charge for residents for emptying of their brown bins. This is not correct. On the 18th of March, the refreshed corporate plan was approved by a majority of councillors. This included a target that Cabinet would consider this matter. I can only imagine that many councillors in this chamber tonight take an exception to that false and misleading statement. On May the 20th, Cabinet did resolve to introduce a subscription-based garden waste service. I just wonder why the petitioner organiser has taken from February the 19th until September to submit this petition. 6 months later and 1 month ahead of subscriptions opening to residents. The petition organiser will know that councils are restricted by government as to the level of increases to council tax. Increasing council tax to subsidising the growing costs of this growing service really would be a brown bin tax, as those that do not use the service would be paying that tax. An opt-in service is by far the fairest way and leaves residents free to make other arrangements, including home composting. I wish someone sometimes, and in this chamber, could tell me which frontline services that residents need and use should be cut in order to balance the council's budget in 25-26 and onwards, which is a legal requirement. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hudson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I echo the thoughts of Councillor Sankey. We're both rural ward councillors, and I do wonder what will happen. I do wonder what will happen in our wards if this goes ahead. Well, it will go ahead. The petition again, if it did not give you an option of zero, and unless you voted for £40 or above, you couldn't continue. So it's a little unfair, I feel there. But the question I would like to ask Mr. Anderson is, who is going to be most affected by this new tax? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any more comments? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I've got quite a bit to say, but I've got a motion on notice as well, so I don't want to pop my bubble, so to speak. But I well received a petition. Thank petition organiser for bringing it. I think the biggest thing, above and beyond whether or not we need to, which perhaps we can pick up in the next item, and lots of Labour members seem to be obsessed that we absolutely need to raise this fee or this tax, whichever way you want to call it, if we're to continue running frontline services. It's not actually true, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out why either. I absolutely accept that the monitoring 151 and the chief exec would give the advice. I don't disagree with the advice that they're giving. That's a risk-based approach, but elected members can make decisions as well, not just simply follow the advice from officers as well. The biggest issue I've got with the introduction of it, and thanks for bringing the petition, is that the Labour Party, when it went to the polls in May 23, sort of held themselves up as a beacon, a light to follow in terms of consultation, open consultation. Actually said in their manifesto and many leaflets delivered that we'd end dead-end consultations, I assume in contrast to any consultations that we were running. And so I'm just wondering what the petition organiser thinks about especially coming from an independent councillor, well-known independent councillor as well, and I know he's got some strong views about political parties and whether they should be involved in at least local politics. What does he think that a political party, one of the major political parties, whether it be Conservative or Labour, come into an administration, giving no indication in the manifesto that they're going to bring this change in, which is significant, giving no opportunity for residents to have their say whether or not even a charge is necessary or whether they want to pay it, and just simply slapping it in front of people and saying, how much do you want to pay? This much, or this much. It doesn't seem very fair, more than anything else. That's the question that I have for the petition organiser. Madam Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
May I sit, Madam Mayor?
You may.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Anderson for bringing this petition to us. It's good that what is available to residents in order to ask key questions to their councillors has a forum like the council chamber to do so. So I think it's very good. Secondly, he touches on quite a few important things. And the key to what he is talking about, I think, is how will this charge affect what we do to help tackle the cost of living crisis? And on the face of it, £40, especially for people who are on the edge as far as the cost of living crisis is concerned, seems like a significant sum of money. Although when you break it down, assuming that there are 25 collections, each collection would cost £1.60. Still not an insignificant sum, but nevertheless, it's there. The key to what we want to do is actually to get the funding to do it. It is unrealistic at any time, as far as I can see, for several months ahead, to plan anything on the basis of Her Majesty's government giving a significant additional grant to local councils. Apart from the fact that the money isn't there, apart from the fact they have promised to keep a cap on spending, it just doesn't work. So what do? Well, the prices at £40 a time, we've seen that if there is a reasonable take-up, 40% I think, or 45%, then there will be a take by the council of over £650,000. Now that's a sum of money that can do some good. That's a sum of money that, in my view, should be focused on helping people who are living in difficulty, helping indeed with the cost of living crisis. 280,000 is good, but it doesn't begin to touch the sides. And I ask another question. You said that we can do away with fripperies and all the rest. Fine. Give up our allowances. Well, all I can say is, if you will, I will. But there are other things. There are other ways that we can save money. And not you, Mr. Anderson, other people sitting in the chamber. We could make redundancies. No, I don't think so. That will only impact on services. We could increase other ESBC charges and fees. I don't think so. They're at a level which is okay at the moment, and we don't want to affect them anymore. I've already made the point that we won't be getting an HMG grant to help us out, I believe, anytime soon. The council tax can't be raised, so what do? How do we bring in additional finance in order to fund the needs of the people who are most in need? And this is one way, regrettably, that can bring a significant sum of money into the council. I will make one point. I do agree that it shouldn't hit everybody. And one of the things that we have talked about as a group is how this impacts on a person or a householder, regardless of their ability to pay. And as most people would expect, what I hope, especially if we come to review, is that we will look and bring in a system of payment that is based on a person's ability to pay. Bigger house, higher charge. Smaller house, no garden, who knows? That is something that we could talk about, but at the moment, I voted in favour. I'll say that clearly now, and I stand by my choice to go back, to look at the consultation and decide how the charge that we as an administration have agreed will be implemented.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Whitaker.
Yeah, we've heard sort of the statistic put out that it's 60% of local authorities already charge for the service. And my question would be sort of, are those 60% authorities around us, and what have they noticed any uptake in fly tipping as a result of the changes in the brown bin collection? They would be the two questions I'd want to ask over this. I don't altogether agree with the comment about the larger houses and small houses, because the larger houses are paying more in council tax anyway. So I think that covers some of that argument to a degree, so it might be difficult to police. If it does go ahead, I would like to see like an annual review on this, so it can be policed, so it's not excessive charge and it relates to a fair charge for a fair service. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I'd like to thank Mr Anderson for bringing this petition forward. I echo a lot of the comments that have already been made tonight. I'm a little disappointed that the leader of the council took the opportunity more to attack the petitioner rather than address the substance of his petition, but I actually welcome Councillor Hawkins' comments that dealt with the subject matter. I think it did raise a few questions, and echoing kind of what Mr Anderson raised as well, in that it feels more like this is a new green bin tax that's being brought in to squeeze residents to drive a profit for the council elsewhere, rather than simply to fund the service as historically been used as an argument for it. And I think it's particularly concerning given that it's typically a lot of older people that actually use and are quite active within their gardens as a form of social life as well, and are now taking a double hit with the removal of the winter fuel allowance as well, recently announced by this Labour government. So I think it's particularly disappointing that Councillor Hawkins then touches upon the idea that we could have potentially brought this in as a progressive tax, impacting those who use the service more than others, and what different schemes they could have introduced based on a personal element and how it would impact them. It would kind of lead me to suggest that this policy has potentially been rushed forward, which I think, given the consultation, that was essentially pick your own charge, with the best option being the one we want as a preference, a bit of a slap in the face for residents. I do have a question for the petitioner. The petition itself, I believe, gained over 5,000 signatures, but the one presented tonight is over 2,000 signatures. Why is it that you believe so many have been cut from the petition that have then been submitted to us tonight?
Thank you. At this point, I'll go back to Mr Anderson. Would you like to answer the questions?
I would love to answer them. There was a lot of questions there, so could I be reminded of them one at a time, just so that I can ensure that I answer every one of them, please?
I'm sorry, Mr Anderson. Would you like to repeat what you were saying?
Sorry, I said, yeah, my mic's on. I said that there was a lot of questions from a lot of councillors. I would like to be reminded of which councillor asked which question, and then I'm very, very happy to answer every single one of them.
If we go very briefly back to the questions, would they like to say what they were? So, Councillor Sankey, just quickly.
Thank you. The percentage of councils, you charging this and the councils not charging this, I hope that was big.
Thank you. I don't understand this argument really that other councils are doing it, so therefore East Staffs Borough Council should do it. I mean, I live in East Staffordshire. I would like East Staffordshire Borough Council to be a leader, not a follower. So obviously somewhere across the country, a council somewhere maybe decided to make this charge, or maybe when they implemented a brown bin green waste scheme, maybe they at that time decided that it should be charged for. That's fine. This is East Staffordshire, this is our borough, and I'm not quite sure why we should follow the lead of other boroughs, unless what we're following is something actually wonderful and remarkable, and this isn't. This is not wonderful or remarkable. Having bins emptied is simply a right, really, of the residents. It's something they've expected to have for a very, very long time.
Okay, we're running out of time here rapidly. I think Councillor Fletcher would like to have a word before the end of the debate.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to talk at length on this because Many of the things I want to say can be said in the next part, unlike some members of your group who have chosen to have a double shot at it. However, I will answer a couple of points, but I'm merely going to respond to the petition, and it may be answer one of your questions. The electorate of ESBC is 75,464. The number of people who signed the petition was 4,448. Of those, 2,166 were from within the borough. 2,282, I'll say that again, 2,282 were from outside the borough, and this a petition that took 6 months to collect together. In other words, 48% of those signing were from within the borough, 51.3% were out of the borough, and that is 2.9% of the electorate signed the petition. And on this basis, you expect us to reverse our decision. Interesting that you want that over that side, but Councillor Sankey is saying we shouldn't go with the 70% of authorities who charge, we should go with the 30% who don't. I'm quite happy to accept that these figures don't mean that the petition's meaningless. It demonstrates that there are people with strong opinions who disagree with me about the need to charge for collecting. I accept that, and I also accept that the opinions are sincerely held, and I respect that. But let's just turn the argument on its head. Suppose that we decided to differ from most authorities, as Councillor Sankey said, and decided not to charge for green waste. And suppose that somebody came to this council with a petition calling us to change that and actually charge for green waste. And further, suppose that 2.9% of electorates signed that. On the basis of that petition, would you expect us to change our mind? And the answer is, of course you wouldn't. The only thing the petition does is shows there is some opposition. As for no question on the charge, whether we should charge or not, that's because the decision, as you well know, all of you, was made some time ago. We weren't doing a referendum, we weren't doing a consultation on whether we should charge or not. The referendum was on how much we should charge, and I'll come to that again when we get to the main motion.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. We only have a couple of minutes left. Have the questions been answered, or is there any councillor who wants to add anything?
Yeah, I asked who was going to be most affected by this new tax. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Okay. I would like, just before I answer that, I would like to say that the council leader got very nitpicky about dates of the happening. I'm a member of the public. I'm not a member of this council, and the dates are well known to him as council leader, but not to me. I do apologise if I've got the occasional date wrong or the date in the petition wrong, but it's the principle, not the date, that's the important thing. Councillor Hawkins asked me if I would give up my councillor's allowance, and if I do, he will give up his. As a parish councillor, I don't get an allowance. If I did, I'm going to say now I am giving it up. So now I expect you to give yours up and be a man of your word, please. Thank you very much for that offer. And to answer that question, the people that are going to be hit by this are going to be the poorest in society. Every time any increase in charges go up, the poorer people suffer. So I've heard today, again from Councillor Hawkins, about, having is it a windows tax, sugar tax, size of your house tax, whatever it was, whatever size of whatever tax. Well, I've got news. We deal with people. We try to get people into housing. And if they're on the housing register, if it's a homeless person, just for example...
We've got 1 minute left.
Okay, well, if it's, for example, a homeless person on the housing register and they are offered a property, that property is offered. If they refuse it, they are off the housing register and homeless, and if Staffs Borough Council then removes their responsibility. Some of the Trent and Dove properties, which are, you know, the ex-council properties, have quite large gardens. They're quite large family properties. They were really well-built, good properties. So does that mean that if somebody then that was homeless is put in a property that happens to have a large garden, they're penalised for that? Which that you can laugh, but that is the truth of the matter. So you're looking at ways of breaking this down, but the actual charge is going to be indiscriminate. It's going to be everybody, every single person that has a brown bin.
Okay, then I think we have to leave it there. We've had 30 minutes. The monitoring officer wants to say something first.
Through you, Mayor. Councillors, I've noticed that there's been reference to a motion on notice whilst discussing the petition. Whilst I can see they are related, they are two very different mechanisms. And of course, the petition has a very different outcome to the actual motion on notice. So for all intents and purposes, they are two very, very different items. But I have noticed the link, so please take on board my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So what we do now is we receive the petition, so formally, thank you very much for bringing it. And thank you for attending this evening. This subject matter will be discussed at the Scrutiny, Climate Change and Environment Committee next Monday, the 30th of September. So thank you very much. We note the petition and it will be discussed further. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for listening.
Okay, we now move to item 8, the motion on notice. I invite Councillor Allen, the Leader of the Opposition, to put forward his motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I propose that we recognise the strength of feeling over the introduction of the new subscription for garden waste, and that the consultation exercise on the cost of the fee has not given residents the opportunity to express their thoughts on whether they agree with the fee or not. We therefore will pause the introduction of the fee until a full and open consultation has been completed before the new year.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Adam Clark. Thank you. Who would like to speak first?
Madam Mayor,
Councillor Allen.
And I'll speak first. So, really, we've been presented with the problem, and really I intend this to be the cure. A few months in the introduction, whilst a new consultation, one that is truly open and fair for people to have their opportunity to have their say whether they want the fee and what the benefits they think might be by introducing a charge, can take place. And I don't mean to hold up the process any longer than is absolutely necessary. So that is really why I've suggested holding one before the end of the year. I don't think that's altogether too difficult. Of course, it could be longer than that if the administration choose, but I didn't want to get in the way of a decision that they seem to have already made. I'll just pick up some of the comments that have been made in a previous debate, a previous discussion. I think around the discussion and the debate in February at the MTFS, which I thought was significant, because I think at that debate, correct me if I'm wrong, I think a lot of the cabinet members at the time, certainly Councillor Fletcher, stood up and said that we haven't made a decision just yet, so no need to be presenting alternatives and amendments on our budget because we haven't made a decision just yet. And then only a few weeks later, the corporate plan came out, where there's a corporate plan target, as we now know, to introduce a fee October 2024. And so that is really a bit of a surprise that the leader chose to go straight to that piece. I also remember the leader at one point suggesting that we chose to introduce it, or considered it at least. And yes, we did consider to introduce a fee. But at that time, we didn't think it was necessary. We didn't think it was acceptable to ask residents to pay for something that they're already paying for through their council tax. And we chose not to. And I know the advice that they've been given. We were given the same kind of advice, but as I said in the previous debate, being a cabinet member and being a councillor is full of, you have many choices in front of you, and you don't always have to go with the advice that you are given, especially when it wasn't clear what the residents were going to get out of raising this extra fee. Yes, more security, but in a world where, can we imagine a world where the government decides that they weren't going to fund local government anymore through the central government grant, that they weren't going to allow any of the business rates to be retained locally, and they were just going to leave many councils, hundreds of councils across the country, in a black hole, in a cliff edge. I just cannot believe that that is a reasonable thing to expect. But I understand why the advice was that we introduce the fee. So really, this is on whether we need to or not. I don't think it is absolutely necessary, as we've been told. But as I say, I don't intend to get in the way of it. If a full consultation could be rejigged and regurgitated, and another consultation could be started, and the information that we get back from that is satisfactory, I wouldn't rule out that we wouldn't, as a Conservative group in opposition, support that introduction of the fee. But I know, you know, bringing raising an enormous amount of money from other sources, including increasing car parking, I just don't think it's necessary, and I haven't had any answers or any suggestions of why we're increasing it at all. So that's my take on the matter, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Before I start, I'll answer one of the questions that Councillor Aaron raised on about the corporate plan and the fact that we hadn't made a decision. You have to budget for possibilities if you know that that's the sort of way you want to go, and you make that in part of the corporate plan, even though the decision has not yet been made. So there is no contradiction. Legally, we have to provide a brown collection service for those who want it. Legally, we are allowed to charge, and 7 out of 9 Staffordshire authorities do charge, at an average of just over £41. The 8th authority collects green waste and food separately, so it doesn't charge. Cabinet considered the option of charging against the reduction in our core funding of, listen carefully, 6.4 million since 2011-12. Now that means we're going to be 6.4 million short on what we had in 2012 forevermore. It would be interesting to know what the government did with that money that they're supposed to have saved. It certainly didn't reduce the national debt, did it? At the same time, councils are restricted in how much they could raise council tax, and even now we're only allowed to raise it by £5 plus inflation. Not nearly enough to make up for the funding that we've lost. In addition, your group, under Richard Grosvenor, made the decision, purely for election purposes, that they would not raise council tax for the whole 4 years of their term of office. So that was a further cut in the amount of money that we lost. When we took over last year, we had our own plans for this council and made promises in our manifesto, including cutting our carbon footprint, increasing biodiversity in our parks, creating tree nurseries at the Greenhouse Centre and Utox to Go Garden, tackling envirocrime, a mobile vehicle to tackle fly tripping, and moving towards greener transport, all of which are expensive but vital to the future of our planet. We are in a climate emergency. You only have to look at the number of extreme climate activities, floods, wildfires, storms. It's getting ever more threatening, not to mention the threat of extinction for many species. And for some countries, the threat is already here with devastating consequences. And it is getting closer. You know, you've got to look what's happening in Europe at the moment. We have a duty to our children, to our grandchildren, and to all future generations. We should not be like Nigel Farage, asking if we can afford to deal with the issues of climate change. We should be shouting from the rooftops, we cannot afford not to deal with the effects of climate change. All essential and all are expensive. We also want to support, one more thing, just a quote from a Native American proverb. We do not inherit the earth from our forefathers, we borrow it from our children. As well as the things I've already mentioned, we want to support voluntary and community groups. We want to help provide warm spaces for those in need. We want to provide home insulation programs for those on low incomes. We want to upgrade our waste collection service. We want to have essential repairs to our council buildings and solar panels on our council buildings. We can't make cuts, too many that have already been made over the last 15 years. The decision to charge for green waste was made by Cabinet some time ago. The consultation was not on whether we should charge, the consultation was the level of the charges to be made. It's interesting, isn't it, that the Conservatives did not decide to call in that decision when it was made, but now, 6 months later, they want to challenge it. We've considered, I promise you, we've considered various options, and I promise there will be changes made to our original thinking based on the outcomes of the consultation and in compliance with the gunning principles. Some questions were asked, I think, about putting waste in grave bins. Well, I can assure you that of the authorities around here, authorities that already charge say they experience that when they started charging, they experienced no great issue with either fly tipping or putting green waste in the grey bins. And I should remind people anyway that fly tipping is an offence, and if you're caught, there's quite a heavy fine. I think I'll stop there because I'm sure other people have something to say. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. May I remind councillors they have 10 minutes maximum. Councillor Adam Clark.
Sorry, I was reserving my right until the end.
That's fine. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
I was just about to ask that, just to make sure, don't worry. Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I've got to just respond to what Councillor Allen has said. Councillor Allen has attempted to put words into my mouth that I didn't say. Now, in the previous debate, the MTFS, and I mentioned the corporate plan. In both of those sentences, I said the word consider, and that is the fact, not what Councillor Allen has just said. Now, our external auditors believe it to be necessary, even if Councillor Allen doesn't. And 25-26 and 26-27, our budget has substantial gaps, totaling more than £3 million. Now, they are facts starkly. We're not sort of generating money from everywhere. I wish we were. We wouldn't have to implement something like this to sort of apply to an ever-increasing service. But just let me remind some members again. Cabinet resolved 20th of May to introduce a subscription-based garden waste service. This was a key decision, subject to call-in. It was not called in by the opposition. The consultation arranged by the Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change was to inform the level of that subscription, amongst other matters, as the decision to implement a subscription charge had already been resolved. So the consultation was not flawed. Councillor Allen's motion, as I know and my colleagues know, is an attempt to frustrate this administration's budget setting process. Now, his motion brings this motion to the council 1 month before subscriptions are due to open to the public. We know from previous amendment attempts on the MTFS that he would much sooner draw down on one-off reserves to balance budget gaps, black holes. That is totally financially unsustainable. A bit like his previous government, a £22 billion black hole, which I am reliably informed had major spending commitments aligned to it from the previous government's reserves. Doesn't that say it all? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Sankey.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Before I start, there's a few interesting comments made by the previous speakers. I just thought I'd clarify some of them. The leader said that the consultation was in the budget, was in the MTFS for doing this work. It was not. If you look on table number 5, it refers to the consultation in 25, 26, 26, 27, with the 2 years of which it was. It was not in the current year to budget that. So that was the first one. Councillor Fletcher talked about corporate planning having to need to have the budget element of it. If he looks on the MTFS, there was no budget for this to get the income from this in the current year, Councillor Fletcher. So I don't think that's particularly accurate. The third point I would make about Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Hawkins says, not keen on raising fees and charges. We go through a process when we're talking about when you talked about alternative options. We do go through fees and charges. But what I'd like to do is to start on looking at this as a financially driven mechanism to raise money for the authority. And I'd like to go back to the MTFS or the budget. And if we look at the budget that we produced back in February, several aspects of that I'd like to raise. First of all, we raised council tax and we put all the money into reserves, no aimed of any specific purpose for that. Secondly, if you look and read that, and it is in table 5, there is no plans for raising this money in 24-25. Zero money for this particular. So you actually, the MTFS said we're not going to raise money. So raise council tax, not necessarily. Said we're not going to do it. Then you look at the finances coming in and out. The financial year end, the last year end, if you look at the statement of accounts, there is a substantial carry forward stroke not spent amount of a 7-figure sum. Not a, to be fair, I put a lot of this down to the officers who do a great job managing the running of the services. So, and this happens, frequently happens year on year. So this happens all the time. So there's a good amount of money coming forward, carry forward. Now look at the current year. Quarter 1, what do we said? £750,000 put into reserves. There is no financial justification for doing this. This is classic Labour. We've had this about that. This is classic Labour targeting residents very much like the winter fuel allowance. You target people like that, and then you look after your mates of in the various typical approach. No different than here. You're targeting here, and what have you done to yourselves? Right, you've raised the number of scrutiny chairs, more money to Labour councillors. You've just gone and done, what have you just done? We've raised the number of cabinet members, more money to Labour councillors. That is Labour's DNA. So I'm not going to listen to some of the councillors as saying this is all, Conservatives are, I've got no room to talk. This is a financially driven thing that I don't think is justifiable, and I support this motion on notice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Paul Farrer would like to speak. Would you like to come forward? Oh, it's the Chief Executive, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. It's actually Lloyd Haynes, the 151 officer, who wants to come to the lectern. I'm going to allow him to use my right to interrupt the debate. I think he just wants to clarify some points of information.
Thank you. Just a couple of points of clarity I wanted to bring across, really. So, in terms of the medium-term financial strategy, the budget that was agreed by full council in February, we weren't seeking to transfer more money to reserves than we were drawing down. So in 24-25, we have budgeted to transfer money to reserves, £264,000, but in the subsequent 2 years, we are currently budgeting to draw down £1.5 million in total. The second point to clarify is, I think Councillor Sankey's just set out that all of the council tax increase for 24-25 was to be transferred to reserves. It clearly wasn't. As I said, there's only a budgeted transfer of £264,000 to reserves this year, and more than that being drawn down in future years. And I think the final point to note in terms of this, just again for clarity, whilst we haven't budgeted in 24-25 for any income from introducing a charge for garden waste, as the leader has set out in his previous comments, it is budgeted or outlined in 25-26 and 26-27, where we have got a significant gap in those years, and without this income, that gap would be even larger.
Thank you very much. I've now got Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Hawkins, the Queen died 16 months ago, so it won't be her government that's going to give us a grant. I did find that quite offensive, to be honest with you, and you should know better. The brown bin tax, another tax in our residents. So since this council has been in, we've increased the council tax, we abolished the free after 3, we increased car parking by 37%, and now they want to further tax you. So what do they spend the money on? Well, there's more scrutiny committees that really have delivered very little, I think, in the last 16 months. There are more cabinet positions now. They wasted £22,000 on looking at Pennycroft in Uttoxeter as a potential area for the sports hub, when we tried to tell them many times, because we're local people, that it wasn't suitable. We now, this week, are told that the maltings is not going to happen. How many tens of thousands of pounds have we spent on that, having new plans done, and now we don't really know what we're going to do? We've got the co-op building. You know, what are we going to do with that? I know it's had this new mural painted on it. I don't know how much that cost, but we're paying business rates on it.
Can you stick to the point of the motion, please, Councillor Hudson?
The point of the motion is that this is an extra tax on the residents that I disagree with, and I feel that we need to look into it a little bit better than we have in the past. And I'm just trying to explain to the residents where a lot of the money has gone. Mr. Anderson was on about where could we save money. Well, we could have saved...
The motion is about something else. Councillor Jones, and then I'll go back to Councillor Clark, and then I think we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've always been against this tax. This is a tax for something that residents already pay for. I've always made that point. We already pay to have our brown bins emptied on a regular basis, and that's included in our council tax. We've just been told that legally you can raise a charge for the service of emptying brown bins. Okay, maybe you can also legally people who don't want to use this service that they actually have already been paying for in their brown bin service. I suspect you don't want to do that. You don't want to give anybody a reduction for not if they don't want their brown bins emptied when they have already been paying for it for such a long time. The motion is actually about the consultation, I think, and people's feelings, the strong feelings we have. Many of the parish councils in my area have contacted me, and this is just a typical thing. They say, the parish council felt that although the policy of charging is common practice across the country, there's been a distinct lack of consultation at local level, and that the survey available to fill in online offered no opportunity to oppose the policy. I haven't seen the results online, but I can't believe there'll be anything other than 100% of the people that did the survey will be saying that the £40 is what they want to pay, because they weren't actually offered an opportunity to say anything other than that. They could have paid more, but you know, I can't imagine anybody saying they really wanted to pay £50 when there was an opportunity to pay 40. I think I don't know how many people took part in the survey, but I tried to complete it, and I know many other people tried to complete it. And when you got to the question that said, do you want to pay £40, £45 or £50, you couldn't actually bypass that. So you could not make your views felt anywhere else in that survey. That's why I think it's totally flawed, and why I think people are so upset about it. And certainly the residents in our area are complaining to me quite regularly through emails and phone calls, and that's why, because they weren't given an opportunity and any proper consultation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to allow Councillor Hawkins a brief comment and then go back to Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't going to speak actually in this debate, but having heard my name mentioned several times when I haven't spoken in this debate, I think I'll have the right to make one or two observations. First of all, I believe absolutely in this subscription. We will discuss how it's going to be introduced after this debate. As Councillor Fletcher said, taking into account all of the observations that have been made at this time. I think that the comments made by Councillor Hudson in terms of this motion were ridiculous and should be stricken from any record. They do not apply in any way, sense or form to the motion that is on the paper. I wish to apologise to Mr. Anderson if I gave the impression that I was laughing at some point. I wasn't. You can trust me, honestly, it was inwardly smiling because I agree with you. I also have made a note to call the clerk of the Uttoxeter Town Council tomorrow, and I also am a parish councillor, and to tell her that I, in accordance with you, am giving up my allowance. I think we need to get away from just thinking about what is the opposition is saying against this subscription, and we need to be able to articulate as clearly as we can why we think it's in the interests of the council taxpayers in East Staffordshire, particularly those that are particularly under the thumb as far as this cost of living crisis is concerned. I know many of my colleagues will be looking very hard at using a lot of the money that is accrued as a result of this to actually make life better for those people who have the least. And to be clear, I did not mean that somebody who is homeless, who moves into an ex-council house with 3 bedrooms, should instantly have to pay a high tariff. They shouldn't. They shouldn't have to pay anything. I think everybody knows what I was referring to about housing, and that is the value of the house and not the rooms that are in it compared to where the person came from before. Just a few bits of clarity. I stand by the vote I took. I know my colleagues did too. Thank you for the time to make a bit of clarification myself.
Okay, thank you. So finally, Councillor Clark, and then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I'm not going to kind of dwell on points that have already been made. I think I agree with Councillor Hawkins that I think the thing that's lacking is the actual justification of why this needs to be brought in. And it hasn't been clearly and properly explained to residents. I have been listening, Councillor Fletcher. The trouble is, every time we get onto the debate, it gets too heated from the administration and they start picking up on semantics of either wrong dates or that we legally can do it or that other councillors are doing it. They don't look at the facts of why should this council do it and clearly and properly explain that to residents. And I think that has been most prominently reflected in the consultation. Had the administration engaged that's on the paper tonight, the motion on the paper tonight isn't calling for us to remove the charge completely. It isn't even calling to consult on whether we should or should not have the charge. It is calling for a proper and full consultation is taking part with residents, even to the point of set a charge, but you could give residents a sliding scale to set how much do they want to charge and then take an average of that. Instead, what's happened is that the administration have picked the best option to be the one that they want to go with, to rubber stamp this through on the pretense that a predetermined decision has already been consulted on with residents. I also pick up Councillor Fletcher's comments from a previous debate as well, where he mentioned that a particular topic had a little over 2,000 residents sign up to it, which was 2.9% of the total residents that had been consulted, and therefore we shouldn't make a decision based on such little agreement with a subject matter. I do propose then that as well, that following tonight's debate, that the council tomorrow should publish the full results of the consultation, including how many residents did take part in that, because going from the confidence from Councillor Fletcher, I assume it's significantly above the 2,100 residents and significantly above the 2.9%. Otherwise, by his words, we shouldn't take it as a meaningful dictation of what that charge should be. So with that, I will be supporting the motion on notice tonight to go back and properly consult with residents, and I hope that councillors support it as well.
Thank you. We're now going to move to the vote. So can I have... Sorry, I'm advised that the Leader of the Opposition can speak again if he wants.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think Councillor Clark's had a salient point on this really. This is about the transparency of the consultation. People haven't been given the opportunity to freely express their views, and I think there's a great deal of confusion over when the decision was made, if made at all, and whether we had the opportunity to call it in or not. I think that's by the by. At the end of the day, the consultation hasn't been very well received at all. I think Councillor Fletcher mentioned that we have to set a budget for future years, and the 151 officer helpfully confirmed that the MTFS that we set in February was actually set for a 3-year period, which I never really contested at the time and I don't contest now at all, but his cabinet member responsible for finance certainly contested it, and I think Councillor Fletcher did as well. I think the words that they both used was that we are setting a budget for this year, the second and third year are not in. This is where the confusions come from.
Can you please state when I'm supposed to have said this?
I did say, sorry, Madam Mayor, I'll say it again. I think he mentioned it at the budget meeting, certainly the budget meeting, if not again at the corporate plan refresh in March as well. And this is where a lot of the confusions come from. But, you know, as Councillor Clark's mentioned, whenever we get to having a discussion, well, we don't get to having a discussion about this, we get to hitting each other around the head about it, and I don't think that's the way to debate things. I haven't come with any intention of delaying the decision at all. I just see what people are saying on the street and what's happening on social media. It's not been very well received, and Labour members know that. Every member in this council chamber knows that the consultation has not been well received at all. But it doesn't matter, because we're just going to carry on and plough on regardless. And every time we get to even suggesting, let's look at a different way of doing it, well, look at all these failings that the Conservatives have done in the past, look at the national government. Well, you know, it's not going to go on forever. You can't keep using those excuses. Fundamentally, the public are not clear on why we're introducing these. And Councillor Fletcher attempted to explain why it's so important that we raise these fees, and I agree with him to a certain extent on how important it is that we try and safeguard the environment, try and become more sustainable and reduce carbon emissions. I agree with him, because a lot of those plans that he's now pushing forward, in fact almost all of them, were planned under our administration, and there is very little change at all. But I disagree that it's important to raise the fee, because as we now know, a lot of those capital changes and a lot of those cost reduction measures, carbon reduction measures, are being paid for out of borrowing, which does not cost £800,000 a year. So whilst I welcome and I thank you for attempting to at least put some meat on the bone as to why we're doing this, it doesn't go anywhere near explaining why we're raising quite so much money. Councillor Hawkins got halfway to making a really good point about a lot of this money will go back to helping people with the cost of living crisis, another major part of the Labour Party's manifesto. It is a shame, though, that when these fee increases come forward and the money that we're considering what to do with the money that we get from them, that it wasn't also then linked to a number of cost of living reduction measures. That's perhaps a little bit of a missed opportunity. I think I just have to address one of the comments that the leader made about, I think Councillor Fletcher did as well, about why we didn't call this in. I think whether we did or didn't is, again, as I said earlier, a bit of, really doesn't matter. We're now discussing it and debating it now. But take it from me, I have to say, in all honesty, and this is not a political ploy at all, we have very little confidence in the procedure and the process that we've experienced before in other call-ins. It's left a very distasteful taste in my mouth and in many members of the opposition's mouths. There is little point in calling anything in, because we get bashed over the head by 2 cabinet members, and then we're told we can't ask questions and we've only got so much time. So this is the forum that we choose to bring and hold the administration to account. Not a call-in, which is conveniently not necessarily done in public and not as high profile as this full council meeting. That's perhaps a damning indictment of the administration that we have, but that is what we have to live with. I have very little left further to say on this, other than to say, as I say, we just would look forward to a full and open consultation. That is nothing less and nothing more, and if we get that, we won't rule out supporting the administration in introducing the fee.
Thank you very much. Right, we're now moving to the vote. So, all in favour of the motion as it stands, please raise your hands. And all those against? Abstentions? So that motion is defeated. Thank you. So we now move to item 9, updated cabinet member responsibilities. I invite the leader of the council to update the council, please, and this item's to be noted.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've communicated this change to members, key partners and the council's website, and I have given reasons for it. This is a proactive and necessary response to the new Labour government's priority to reform the National Planning Policy Framework. Councillor Louise Walker is now Cabinet Member for Planning Policy, and I'm sure that she will issue a statement in due course. I'm required to inform Council of this change and for Council to please note this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We move to item 10, the annual pay policy statement for 2024. And again, I invite the leader of the council to propose and present this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, again. The purpose of this report is to approve changes to the annual pay policy statement update for 2024. The report has been presented to the groups, and members have had the opportunity to ask questions. The executive summary, there is a legal requirement to produce and publish a pay policy statement and to review it annually. Any amendments need to be recommended to this full council. I neglected to say, and I would like to say it now, that I'd like to thank Helen Bacon, who's here tonight, who's been leading us for her time here when she's been heading up our HR function. And I'm very grateful for her coming back tonight to be present as this report is presented. Now, the main statement amendments are shown at 2.2 of the report, and the appendices is attached to the back, and really there is only one recommendation, that at 13.1 to agree the pay policy statement 2024 as presented, and I so move.
Thank you. Can we have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Fletcher, thank you. Would anyone like to speak on the motion? No. In that case, I'll go straight to the vote. Those in favour, please. Those against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Okay, number 11 is the annual Treasury Management Report. And in the absence of the Cabinet Member for Finance and Treasury Management, I again invite the Leader of the Council to propose and present the item.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report, as members will know, is required through regulations issued under Local Government Act 2003 to produce an annual Treasury Management Report. This report fulfills that obligation and provides a review of Treasury activities during the year against the approved Treasury Management Strategy Statement. That strategy was approved by full council in February 2023, so under the previous administration. It has shown that it was fit for purpose and has very, very well. The annual Treasury Management Report, it covers the following areas. The strategy for 2023-24 in a summary form, the Council's Treasury position as at the 31st of March 2024, borrowing and investment outturn, the economy and interest rates, compliance with Treasury limits, which we have, and other Treasury management matters. 3.2 will show the summary of the Council's Treasury Management activities during 23-24, and it'll show that they were all carried out in line with the approved strategy. The highlights of that can be found at 3.2, but I can just highlight at the end of that 3.25 that this report was presented to the Audit Committee at their meeting on the 26th of June 2024. They noted the performance and recommended this report to full council. I move now to the recommendation. There is only one at 11.1 to note the annual Treasury Management Report for 23-24 and the associated Prudential Code indicated. I so move, Madam Mayor.
I'm advised that this is noting only and not voting.
I knew that as well, Madam Mayor, but it does have a recommendation on here, which is to note, and that's what I've moved.
Okay then, so we're noting it. So, item 12, the amendment of the Constitution Part 3 HA Development Plan Committee. And for this, I invite the Monitoring Officer to present.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, the report before you is to seek the approval of an amendment to the Council's Constitution, in particular Part 3HA, Development Plan Committee. The change is a fairly simplistic one, in that it increases the membership number of the Development Plan Committee from 5 to 8, and the quorum is referred to as a fraction rather than number. And these are the only changes made to the Constitution by virtue of this report, councillors. You will note your officer's comments in the report, in that broadening membership of the committee would have the obvious benefit of a greater pool of input. Moreover, the membership number would be reflective of our other committee numbers, ensuring consistency across the Constitution. Indeed, many of our committees already refer to a fraction when stipulating the quorum, as opposed to an actual number. You will be aware, councillors, that certain sections of the Constitution cannot be amended without the approval of full council. Indeed, Part 3HA specifically states that its functions can only be amended by your authority. In conclusion, councillors, the recommendation is to adopt the amended Part 3HA of the Constitution, that the monitoring officer be authorised to make any necessary further changes to the draft document in relation to formatting, numbering, or such other changes consequential or incidental to the intentions of, and subsequent to 2, that the revised Constitution becomes effective following any such changes being implemented by myself, the monitoring officer. And that is the conclusion of my reports, councillors and mayor.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for this, please? Councillor Fitzpatrick. Would anybody else like to speak? You're moving it. Okay. Shall we move to the vote? Who's the seconder? Councillor Fletcher. Thank you. Are there any other people wishing to speak? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Conservative Group are quite happy to support this. A larger committee means more experience. But I would just like to ask, given that this was a corporate plan target, I wondered why. I thought it was useful to note that we've had a corporate plan target that's gone red on this item. And I just wondered if the cabinet member responsible at the time for this and if the controlling group itself was aware that this would be considered and would go red at the time that these changes were then withdrawn from a future council meeting, because I don't see why these changes couldn't have been brought through earlier.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'd just like to respond to that. I think Councillor Allen's getting confused with this corporate plan targets. There was no corporate plan target to change the membership of the Development Plan Committee. It was more to do with planning and calling. So this was not a corporate plan target.
Okay. Anybody else? Nope. We're going to move to the vote then. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? No. That's carried. I'd like to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes for a comfort break because we're nearly at 8 o'clock. Do I need a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That's carried. We'll have a 5-minute break. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. We can now move to item 13, appointments to committees. I will invite the Corporate Service Manager, James Abbott, to present this report, which we will vote on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, members. So this report comes forward due to the changes to the Development Plan Committee approved just a few moments ago, and is simply to confirm the appointments to committees reflecting the proportionality of the Council's overall political makeup. The supporting detail is set out in the normal format in the report, and the tabled Appendix 1 provides the nominations received from the two group leaders. Did want to just highlight that the document presented this evening to you still has Councillor Louise Walker listed on the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee, so we will need to replace that with the word vacancy for the purposes of the document there tabled. So there are two recommendations to be proposed this evening: that the Council agree to the number and allocation of councillors serving in each committee and panel as set out in paragraph 5.4 of the report. And secondly, that subject to the previous recommendation, the Council approve the appointment of councillors to serve on each committee and panel, including appointing the ungrouped independent member to the residual seats on the Planning Committee and the Licensing Committee. And with that, I shall pass back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So can I have a proposer for this motion? Councillor Fitzpatrick. And a seconder, please? Councillor Allen. Would anybody would like to speak on this? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As has been already suggested and pointed out, that there's an error in the appointment to committee, so I'd like to raise an amendment then. In addition to 13.1, that Councillor Louise Walker is removed from health scrutiny, and that seat remained vacant, subject to future decision.
Can Mr. Abbott just clarify a minute?
So the recommendation is to approve the appendix that's been tabled. I say just to highlight the fact that if we can replace the word vacancy over where it says Louise Walker in terms of the Health and Wellbeing Committee, that was the suggestion, but happy to take any alternative view.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I've just spoken with councillors during the adjournment over that. I think the amendment as it stands, I'm not too sure that it's required given the comments of the officer. I appreciate you're not going to be happy about it, Councillor Allen. But Mayor, ultimately, you preside over the meeting. If you're happy to proceed on the basis of the officer's recommendations here, then we can.
It seems to me that the amendment is not necessary because Councillor Walker has come off the committee and will remain off the committee. But Councillor Allen, you've got a comment?
Yeah, so I'm just to clarify, Madam Mayor, the paragraph is 3.1 in the health scrutiny says that no member of Cabinet shall be on the committee. I mentioned this to the monitoring officer before the start of the meeting, and he just had a discussion right here and suggested that it needs amending. So I've prepared an amendment. There's my amendment. As the motion is and the recommendations are, it refers to the appendix. The appendix has Councillor Louise Walker's name in it. I don't understand why this is a great deal of confusion or difficulty. It's a simple amendment that cures the problem in having an executive member on scrutiny.
Thank you. I'll accept the amendment. Is there a seconder for it? Councillor Clark. Does anybody want to speak? Fitzpatrick.
Madam Mayor, as was said, I don't believe it was necessary. I thought Councillor Allen indicated to myself and the monitoring officer just earlier that he was happy and he understood the position, but he's moved in an amendment. It's been seconded. I think we're all happy to vote for that amendment. At least it gets to win something tonight.
Okay, Councillor Sankey, did you want to say something? No, I think we'll move straight to the vote. All in favour, please. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No, so the amendment is carried. Do we need to go to the same?
Yeah, I mean to vote on the amended motion.
So now we need to vote on the amended motion. I'd like to go straight to the vote. I don't think it needs any more discussion. So those in favour of the motion with the amendment? And those against? Any abstentions? No, that's carried then. Thank you. So item 14 is questions. There's been one question on notice received pursuant to Rule 18, which you should have all had a copy of. It's been received 7 clear working days prior to the date of this meeting from Councillor Sankey. You should also be able to see the answer there as well. So, Councillor Sankey, do you wish to raise a supplementary question?
Yes, please, Madam Mayor, if I may. Can I first of all thank Councillor Walker for his response and the work on that. So I do appreciate his support in this area. My follow-up question is: could the leader of the council ensure that there's a consistent support from the cabinet on this one, so that we don't get any miscommunications around the area? Because it's quite an important one, and we've got cross-party support on this, so I really would like to make sure that we're all speaking as one. So if the leader could confirm that the cabinet will speak as one on this particular issue. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I think your question is to Councillor Walker. So, Councillor Walker, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Sankey's very, very generous giving me all those praises. He targets me on one case for being a trade union member, but then congratulates me on others. So I thank you for at least that part of it. The answer is yes. What more can I say?
Thank you very much, Councillor Walker.
Thank you. There's no debate on this item. Just to inform members, 2 questions were received earlier today, which were stated as urgent, but it's been explained to those councillors that it is not urgent, and if they want to put them to the next council meeting, they're welcome to do so. At this point in the meeting, I'll need to exclude the press and the public. I therefore move that, in accordance with section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and the public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that there would be disclosed exempt information. Can I have a seconder for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried, so we'll just wait a minute while the cameras and everything are turned off and the public is ushered out. Thank you.